Hey everyone, this is Chris.
And Lorenzo.
And welcome to our Best of Saturday series. Now that we have hundreds of episodes, we get a lot of listeners asking us where to start.
So we'll be selecting some of our most popular episodes to share each Saturday from our years of podcasting. We hope you enjoy it.
No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, I want to talk about a letter that we received from one of our listeners. A couple days ago, it came in, and it's from a person who asked to not have the email read aloud, but kind of just summarize it instead.
Okay.
They are worried that because of the coworkers they have that who also listen to the show, that they don't want to be identifiable. And I totally respect that. This person said that they are having a really difficult time talking to their employees about performance issues, about even just, kind of shooting the breeze with people that they don't feel like they have a lot in common with, just kind of talking in general. And I feel like it's a common trend. I don't think this is unique to this one listener. I have certainly been in situations in my career where I have had a hard time talking with individual employees based on just a lack of confidence in the relationship. So I want to talk about this a little bit because I think this is something that a lot of our listeners might be able to relate to. Are there people who report to you or have reported to you where it's just like, I don't want to say pulling teeth to talk to because it's not difficult. It's just really uncomfortable. Something you avoid like the plague and only do it when it's absolutely necessary?
Absolutely. Yeah, would fully admit that. I think over a long career that's going to happen. And most of the time, it's not even necessarily a situation where you don't connect on certain things because, as a leader, there's an element of responsibility that you do want to connect with your people and you do want to you do your best to find things that you have in common or conversations that you can have. Some people are natural, or I would say natural, but like they're introverts, and some people are extroverts. So some people will only give you bits and pieces when you try to connect with them, and I can respect that. Some people see the professional relationship between managers and people as something that they don't want to get too personal into or share too much into, and I can totally understand that as well. I think for me personally, where I make either a effort for or I don't do my best to proactively try to change the behavior when it comes to communicating with certain individuals is many times people that just show up and they're either low performers or they have a bad energy or they've done things consistently to go against what the team is trying to achieve. So, many times those people find themselves making a different decision and going somewhere else into another job or whatever. But sometimes they are good people. They are, they do bring value to the team. They do accomplish the things they're being asked to accomplish. They just kind of have that, sense of they're about themselves and they're not about the team, or you kind of get bits and pieces from multiple people. And so I personally, even if it's somebody that I think I can connect with on certain things, so maybe we do have things that are in common when it comes to consistently communicating with them, if I know that they are doing things to damage the team or to not achieve what we're all trying to achieve together, I would be the first one to tell you that I would probably avoid those conversations unless absolutely necessary.
You're not alone, and I'm not alone. And when I got this email, the first thing I did was I did some Googling. I wanted to see what is out there about this, and I came across a few articles, but one of them stood out to me. It's over a year old, but I think it's very relevant. It's written by a writer by the name of Corinne Pertil, who is a reporter with Quartz. And the article's from January of last year, and we'll link to it in the podcast description. But the title of the article says, almost 70% of U.S. managers are scared to talk to their employees. And I think scared is, it's a little clickbaity with the title of the article, scared. I think it's discomfort more so than fear. And you can describe it as fear, but it's really just discomfort. If you really think about what's the worst that could happen, it's nothing to be afraid of. It's more of just that lack of comfort to be in a situation where you're talking with a person, potentially giving them feedback, potentially negative feedback, and feeling like they don't think you have the authority to do it. And I know that when I have been in situations where I have a hard time giving negative feedback, usually it's because I think the person I'm giving negative feedback to, or constructive feedback, if you will, I believe they think I don't have the authority to give it to them. And to me, that shows a lack of relationship, because authority used to mean higher up on the org chart. It used to mean that I was your boss and you reported to me. Now, authority to give negative feedback or constructive feedback is more about the relationship you have with the person than whether or not they report to you, because it's ultimately whether or not you're going to see a change. And so when I'm looking at this article by Corinne, some of the stats really stand out. She talks about how the fact that the percentage of managers who don't like talking to their employees, it mirrors the percentage of U.S. workers who say they're not engaged at work, which is about 2/3. And so there's clearly a correlation there. And it's obvious that I think there's a couple of causes of this. So on the one hand, there's no doubt that there are a lot of people who have an aversion to confrontation. And we've spoken about it on the podcast before. If it's really uncomfortable to you to confront somebody or to give them feedback, then you're already kind of predisposed to be in this situation. And I don't want to sound, curmudgeon-y about this or make it seem like this is a generational thing, because I see it in all generations. I think that the other issue is that there are a lot of people in the workforce today who have never come up in their career under leaders who were really good at this. And so they've never seen it in action, and they don't know what good looks like. And so they're kind of left figuring this out on their own and kind of floundering and not being able to figure this out. And it's never going to get solved by people teaching others en masse. You'll get some great leaders here and there that are able to teach the next generation. But if you are unfortunate enough to not be reporting to a person who knows how to do this well and can sit you down and say, this is how you give constructive feedback, this is how you build relationships with people to the point where you're allowed to give constructive feedback, et cetera, then these people are going to have to figure this out by themselves.
Yeah, no, well, I think it's a great call out. And I really like this article and kind of what you're talking through, because I think there's some good data in there. And I think there definitely are some things that connect naturally in regards to engagement and communication. No, I think what you brought up towards the end made a lot of sense to me. That was the first thing that I was thinking was, with the things that we've discussed previously around social leadership, around the idea of an empowering work environment, around doing things where you're creating culture and whatnot. I think people, and I see this a lot, is people confuse the idea with building great culture and empowering people is that's anti-accountability, when in fact accountability is a huge piece of that. And the reason why I bring that up is because I've had dialogue with other general managers of other organizations and retailers and things like that, and some of the things that I've heard in regards to, we have dialogue around performance management. And what does that look like within your organization, and how do you, work to help people get better? But if they choose not to get better, then how do you move them out of the company and things? We had that type of dialogue. And what I've heard most recently, a lot of, is general managers saying things like, "Well, we just basically reduce their hours until there's no more value for them to come to work." Right?
Great. Kick the can down the road to the next set of leaders.
Exactly. Right. So it's like they do these things that are not based in direct conversation. They're not based in relationship building. They're not based in accountability and having honest dialogue with people. They're really, worked into the system to either annoy people out of the business or, disengage with them so much that then people do something wrong or stupid, which then results in them losing their job, even though the whole time they should have been released because they weren't good for the job. So I believe that it's one of those things that, most recently, probably in the last 10 years or so, there's less and less. Let me sit down and show you how to have this level of dialogue with somebody and connect with somebody, and also talk about that connection and how that can have an impact on the overall business. A lot of that's gone away, and maybe it's a result of it shifting into HR teams or third-party HR teams, and then it becomes less about the manager-employee connection and more about going to these trainings and hearing how to do this theory, but never actually somebody sitting down and showing you how to do it. And I think there's a lack of role modeling of the leaders in maybe the last 5 to 10 years, where as a leader growing up in retail, I can tell you, almost what the weather was like on the certain days that I was sat down by my direct leader and had very specific dialogue about my performance, what I needed to get done, how it needed to happen. And also within that dialogue, we talked about me and my family and what was going on. And so I was able to see that and hear that and be a product of that environment to then be able to pay that forward to my people as I became a leader.
It's interesting because as we've gone on throughout the last 10 or 15 years, it has become more important to have regular conversations with employees. And so at the beginning of my career, I could rely on my annual review and then maybe like a mid-year review kind of thing. But anything else, any other conversation I had with my direct manager outside of the kind of formalized review process was kind of one-off conversations where it was almost always, hey, this is what you did wrong. This is what you need to do to get better. Mm-hmm. And they weren't on a regular interval. They were whenever I did something wrong, I needed to do something different. And so maybe that was a couple times a year. Maybe it was never, it really depended. And employees are more and more telling their leaders through surveys and through feedback and just through the very, very high turnover and low engagement that just exists across the workforce. They're telling their leaders over and over again that one of the things that we need in order to feel engaged and to do our best and bring our best to work is we want to have regular, reliable feedback, communication, talks between my manager and me. I need that all the time. And it's not uncommon to see employees who expect that on a weekly basis, or sometimes even more often than a weekly basis. Some employees feel like they need to have their hand held just a little bit. And if they get what they're looking for in the short term, they'll need it less often. They'll become more able to rely on that they can read you as a leader when you come in the room, that you'll be able to talk to them when you have an issue. But if what they need to get going is to know that they have a regular check-in with you, then you might have to schedule that, because they're not going to come to you. They're not going to reach out to you and say, I need to have a check-in. They'll believe that they're coming off as annoying if they want one of those every week or more often than every week. I don't know many people who have a hard time asking for those talks to happen quarterly or biannually, but to say I need one every month or every other week or every week, I don't know many employees who feel comfortable saying that. They'll just let the problem fester. They won't ask for it. So you as the leader, I think you have a responsibility to make sure that you know what kind of feedback rhythm each of your employees is looking for. And it's okay that it's different from each one of them. It's okay if you have some employees that you meet with every week and you have some employees that you don't meet with except for once a month, because some employees need that and some don't.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is I think it definitely lands, to answer the kind of the question from the listener, who sent the email, it lands in the lap of the leader. You have to have intent to want to proactively approach and talk to all of your people. And if you're struggling with some of those conversations, it's okay to do, tell them that. It's okay for you as a leader to walk up to one of your people and tell them, say, hey, look, I feel like I'm struggling to connect with you, and that's unacceptable as your leader. I want to make sure that our relationship is such that I can be there to support you in what you're working on, help you build what you want to build, and I want us to be able to have some of those conversations, but I want it to be at your pace, and I want it to be in a way that's comfortable for you as the employee. But I'm struggling because I feel like we're not connecting, and I don't want to fail you in that way. And so let's have a conversation about that. And I think if you do that as a leader, it's going to help figure some of those things out. It's going to help build those relationships, and it's going to help start to build out what it is that the employees need. I think what's funny, as you were talking through some of those scenarios, the more honest dialogue you can have, the more, connection you can make with your people, the less they ask for formal sit-down conversations about their development.
Yeah, because they know where they are.
They know where they are, and they know that they can ask at any point during the day. And they know, hey, can I get 5 minutes today? Sure. Can we grab a coffee? You got it. I know I can see somebody in the hallway and be like, hey, I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks. How's it going? How's life? What are you up to? What's some of the work that you're working on? When you can have that level of dialogue, then when you actually sit down in the formal environment, you can get a lot more accomplished in that space, because informally you're doing those little bits and connections throughout the day, every single day. That to me as a leader is where I get my energy from, are those little 2 and 3 minute fun conversations that's about the person, it's about shoes, it's about music, and a lot of times it's about work, but we're doing it all at the same time quite often throughout the day. And I think that just helps to build the right kind of culture, and that will break down some of those walls.
I mean, I love the first thing you said, which is, it's okay to say to an employee who reports to you, I'm having a hard time connecting with you, or I feel like I am, and to own it. Not, I'm having a hard time connecting with you because something's wrong with you.
Right.
It's, I'm having a hard time connecting and I'm failing as a leader because I can't, and I need to rectify that. I mean, there's nothing opens up lines of communications and doors to relationship building than approaching a situation from a standpoint of vulnerability, of kind of saying the first problem we're going to talk about here is my own, not whatever not what's going on in your life, and not what you need to work on to get better. We're there here for that too, and I can help you through that. But the first thing I want to address is the fact that I have not done my job in connecting with you in a way that works for you and that works for our relationship. I mean, talk about breaking down barriers and making sure that employee doesn't approach the situation on the defensive. That's I think that's fantastic advice.
Yeah, I think so too. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 minute hack.
The 1 minute hack.
All right, for this episode's 1 minute hack, this is about ownership when it comes to the communication with your employees. So if you can think about the people on your team reporting to you, and some of them you probably have good relationships with, and there might be some where the relationship's a little cold or a little sour, think about those people and go up to each one of them with purpose and say that you are owning the lack of communication in the relationship with them. Don't try to have a conversation with them at that point about anything that is feedback, positive or negative, but own the lack of communication and the lack of relationship, and tell them that your goal is to try to get better with that when it comes to them specifically. And then I want you to ask them what interval of communication works best for them, where they can feel like they can voice any concerns they have, you can voice any concerns you have. And this doesn't stop you from doing feedback on the fly if it's needed, but this gives the employee something to rely on, that they have this time set aside with you. And you can give them the option of it being weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever works on their schedule or whatever makes them feel most comfortable. And let them know they can change that too. If you start with it every month and they feel like it's not enough, tell them, hey, you know what? You can tell me if you want it to be more than that, or it can be less if they start on a more frequent basis. But the goal is to make it so that initial discomfort of starting a conversation is gone, because you know the conversation is scheduled to happen anyway, and you can sit down and have that conversation. Over time, you're going to start to feel and see a softening of that relationship between you and that employee, and hopefully it will become something where it doesn't need to be on a specific interval, because the employee just can rely on the fact that they can reach out to you whenever they need it.
Yeah, I think it's a great 1 minute hack, and I really like the idea of owning it up front, and also letting the employee know that, that you're going to schedule time for it so that they have time to think about it and reflect. Because I think many times, as just a human being, not even just a leader and an employee, but saying like, hey, this isn't where we think it should be, and I own it, and you know what, like I want to make it better, and they go, okay, and then you put a time on the calendar. A lot of times that time lets people self-reflect, and if they really want to be on that team, if they really want to do great work, if they really want to, have a better relationship, then they'll probably come to that meeting and they'll own some of it too. And say, you know what, I need to own this too, and I could probably be better. So I really like that idea of, the responsibility falling on the leader to begin with, and then having time to discuss it. I think that's the best bit of advice in somebody in this situation, like the listener is. And I think that at least at that point, you've done your due diligence to really create a better environment and better communication and a better relationship with that employee.
I emphatically agree. I think whenever the relationship between a leader and an employee is not where it should be, it doesn't matter whose fault it is the responsibility of the leader to fix that relationship or end that relationship. One of those two things needs to happen. And the longer it's able to sit and fester, the more likely it is to start infecting other members of the team, and then you end up with a culture problem. So being able to nip this in the bud at the beginning by having these communications and having these talks and this communication, it really is the only way to go.
I completely agree. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.